Welcome back. We're talking about the latest unrest in Iraq. Thousands of Iraqis have taken to the streets in protest against the current government. Joining me now is Raed Jarrar with the American Friends Service Committee. Yasmeen Sami Alamiri is the politics and White House reporter for Rare Media, and Rik Gustafson is executive director of the Education for Peace in Iraq Center. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Raed, let me start with you. We just heard the former national security advisor in Iraq, al-Rubaie, tell us that Iraq is in a better place right now, that the political system works, that parts of civil society work, things like the banking system works, things like business works. You buy that?
I don't think he buys it either. I didn't really take his words very seriously today. I know Mr. al-Rubaie for a long time. And the fact that he can't leave his home to go to the studio to get this interview, I think is an indication to where Iraq stands today. Iraq is a country without a functional government. Iraqi government is one of the most corrupt governments in the world, according to Transparency International. Iraqis don't get any of the basic services anymore that were provided by their government historically in the last few decades. And Iraq is in a turmoil. The country is falling apart. There are sections of the country controlled by extremist organizations, sections of the countries that are seceding in the north. Other parts of the country are collapsing because of lack of services. So I don't think there is any sugar coating that can go on the situation. It's a really bad situation, and it continues to deteriorate because there is no will or capability of the current Iraqi government to fix it. And it doesn't seem like there is any will by foreign governments like the US or Iran or Russia to stop their interventions in the country. So we're stuck in this cycle of violence and corruption.
Yasmeen, what is your view? I mean, we heard Dr. al-Rubaie tell us there that Iraq is now a democratic state. They've changed governments 3 times, as he pointed out. But what is that worth to people when they don't have basic services?
Sure. I mean, look, I understand there's 2 fights that we're fighting, right, in Iraq. There's the political battle, and there's the real on the ground tangible things, which is people are not getting basic services, and we know that the unemployment rate is continuing to rise. Young people are completely disenfranchised, and day-to-day livelihood has been blocked by this massive corruption. But then on the other end of it, there's the PR battle. If you have the heads of government saying that it's all, plummeting and we can't do anything about it and we've lost complete control of our country, what are the people then meant to believe, and what hope do they have? So we can't fault the people in charge for saying we think that we're in control of our country, because that's their job. So we have to be very understanding for the fact that, yes, things do take time. I have a little bit more sympathy for the governments that are trying to rebuild. You cannot take a country out of years and years of crippling sanctions and being under a tyrant and then put them through a war and then rebuild a democracy in the eyes of a foreign government, as it has with the United States. So I think we have to give them a little bit more time. And yes, is it better than it was during the time of Saddam? It's relative. I mean, what maybe the services were there, but there was a deep sense of paranoia, and the people weren't safe.
I mean, if I can say something about this, I apologize. But like, I lived in Iraq before 2003, and I think that Iraqis lived under a dictatorship. It was a brutal dictatorship that did not allow any space for political dissent or freedom of expression. But Iraqis had functional public service, sector that provided to them healthcare and education and basic things. Now Iraqis still don't have a democracy. It's still a space where the ruling parties are not allowing for freedom of expression or democratic participation. And Iraqis lost all of the services that they used to get. So from my perspective, I don't really see it as a negotiable issue. The situation now is definitely worse than it used to be before 2003. Okay. It's not a comparison between Saddam and not Saddam. It's a comparison between a time that Iraqis ran the country and the time that a foreign invasion destroyed it.
Okay, let me bring Rik in here. Rik, given the recent history of Iraq, are we perhaps being a little bit too harsh on the government here, seeing that it's trying to implement some development plans in the country? But when you look at what's been going on over the past few weeks, Do you get the sense that this is a government in control?
I think if the government was in control and those that truly wanted the best for Iraq, then we would be seeing these reforms going through. We're not. If we were truly to honor the people of Iraq and the potential of the country, then there wouldn't be a green zone. But there's been this incredible isolation between the political elites and the rest of the country. So, you know, while within the green zone you have the comfort of air conditioning and luxury, and you know, the political parties are dividing up the ministries, and these become their personal fiefdoms, and they maintain these patronage networks of contracts to their, you know, to the party faithful, to their friends, but not really serving as institutions. I mean, what is needed, and I think what Raed is speaking to, yes, under Saddam, there are terrible things, but you still had institutions. And right now what we have is, you know, it's more of a country of militias and fiefdoms rather than a functioning political system. It's not to, I don't want to diminish that there's been efforts, but right now, I mean, you know, we're seeing the results. And meanwhile, Iraq is facing enormous challenges. We have an economic crisis, we have the security crisis, we have the humanitarian crisis. I mean, 10 million Iraqis need emergency humanitarian assistance. All of those challenges, and so what you need is you need a functioning political system to be able to meet those challenges. And unfortunately, you look at the reforms, and there's too much of a vested interest in maintaining the status quo, and we're not seeing the technocrats take over the cabinet as the Prime Minister wants to put forward, and these other efforts. And you know, so I mean, I do think that there's a serious political crisis. Time is running out. There's an economic crisis. Iraq is burning through its oil reserves. And when that money runs out, it's going to be even worse. And meanwhile, the United States, the international community, I think, is too focused on ISIS, you know, the Islamic State. And they're once again getting it wrong. They're not thinking about the day after the Islamic State, the day after ISIS. You know, you go back, you turn the clock back to 2003, the US did not focus enough on the day after Saddam. We're about to make the same mistake and not looking at the longer term needs of Iraq and honoring a plural society rather than, you know, creating kind of these sectarian quota systems that I think is destroying Iraq.
But I think that's the point. I mean, I think that's the reason why when you see these protests happen, you're then seeing the people speak up for themselves and say it's time for us to demand our rights, instead of being waiting to have somebody tell them this is your time to then demand your rights. These are Iraqis that are rising up and saying it's our time, and we want people that are based on a meritocracy representing us, not filling these blocks or quotas. Exactly, that's been discussed.
Right. Yeah. Right. The Prime Minister, Haidar al-Abadi, was brought in as Mr. Fix-It. He was going to fix all these problems. Sure. He promised to improve government services, end corruption. That was the promise. What happened to him?
I actually remember being on this show the day that he was appointed, and I said the problems are not really a problem of choosing a new prime minister. It's a problem of changing the roots of the system. The foundations of the Iraqi political system is corrupt. The foundation is based on sectarian allocations and quotas. It's based on ethnic and sectarian divisions. And the fact that Mr. al-Abadi came exactly from the same political party that ran the country, from the same political heritage, and the same political, you know, ideology that has been running the country, did not seem to be a good sign that he will be moving the country to another place.
To be clear now, the current unrest that we are seeing is not sectarian in nature, is it? It's not Shia against Sunni.
It's not, and that's exactly why it's happening. Yeah. Because Iraqis tried multiple times in the last 13 years to say this system of sectarian quotas is destroying the country. It's causing divisions inside the country. It's giving cover to ethnic and sectarian cleansing inside the country. And we have to rethink it. We have to have a government that is not sectarian. There were successful attempts to vote for blocs that ran on non-sectarian agendas back in the day. And although those blocs won the elections, they were prevented from running the country. So what's going now is that Iraqis are trying to address the root cause for what's going on. The root cause of corruption, the root cause why we have ISIS and why we have Shiite militias and why we have Kurdish and Christian militias is not to go, the solution is not to go bomb them. The solution is to deal with the foundations of the corrupt system. And that's why these demonstrators are not sectarian. They are mixed, and they're demanding that we have a government that is not based on sectarian affiliations.
Eric, what do you make of the fact that a large part of the country is still under the control of Islamic State? That's an added problem for the central government in Baghdad. Is Iraq capable of defending itself?
Well, I mean, you're right. The second largest city by population is the city of Mosul, and it's still under the control of the Islamic State. We have been seeing some progress in terms of the fight against the Islamic State, but it's been very slow going. And I think that, once again, the question is what happens after, even if there's success in clearing Mosul. So I think that ultimately, when you think about security, we're talking about human security. We're not just talking about getting ISIS out of Mosul. We're talking about ending the car bombs that are, a daily occurrence. I mean, Baghdad was, this past month, according to the latest UN casualty reports, was one of the most dangerous cities to be in. So I think, once again, you have to address that. And meanwhile, there's a lot of people that are isolated from that and aren't affected. I mean, again, those that are within the green zone. So ultimately, I think there has to be progress that benefits all Iraqis. And if there's a real separation, don't think Sunni Shia, think haves and have-nots. That's the real separation in Iraq today.
Right, and to address that, Yasmeen, what needs to happen right now?
I think that one of the main things that's been alarming for me as somebody who covers foreign policy from the United States is that there is this overwhelming push by this administration to bolster the leadership that's in Baghdad right now. And I think a lot of Iraqis are saying this clearly is not working. Abadi's clearly not doing what he's supposed to be doing. And so why then do all of these confidence-building measures of sending the Vice President of the United States to speak to Abadi and be very, bolster him up and to say that we have confidence in you when the country is obviously in crisis. And I think one very important step is to say, we acknowledge that this is not working. We acknowledge that you are in crisis, and we need to make other steps to remedy this that are less than Band-Aids that are trying to salvage in their waning months. Oh, we left Iraq better off than when we came in. And I think that's part of the issue from a foreign policy perspective.
I mean, on Saturday, after the protest, the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad issued a statement. Once again, they made it about the fight against the Islamic State. Correct. And then they had this secondary statement, but it was very much like an afterthought about, yes, we need to also recognize the aspirations that the Iraqis have to be able to address corruption, to have a functioning public services. But it's like an afterthought. It has to be front and center. That's how you'll have progress.
How much does somebody tackle if in the remaining months of their term? I mean, it doesn't make sense to restart an entire battle where ISIS is exactly what's dominating headlines. Yeah. ISIS is exactly the primary fear of most people, and so it makes sense.
But I think, there is a very strong interest on the part of really global security, not just U.S. interests, but global security, to address the long-term needs of Iraq, to begin to build the stability, to be able to honor this. And there's so much potential that is being squandered right now. But to be able to honor what Iraq has to offer and to be able to have a functioning political system that honors that.
Right. I've got 40 seconds.
But the issue is not really ISIS. ISIS is a symptom of the problem, yes. And I think it is being used now, like even with the messaging of bringing troops back from fighting ISIS to deal with the demonstrators, it's trying to blame the demonstrators for deterioration. I think the root cause of the problem is building a united front in Baghdad, and that would help defeat extremism. It will help you reunify the country. So what's going on in Baghdad is really a better way to defeat ISIS than dropping bombs on ISIS.
If you like what you just saw, follow us on social media and visit our website, cctv-america.com.